My portfolio is lacking a few Dartmoor landscape compositions. Today I'm going to put that right.
Well, good morning. It's really great to be out again walking on Dartmoor. I've needed to blow the cobwebs out. It feels like I've not been out for quite a long time, and it's a cracking morning, as you can see. The sun's just coming up. Unfortunately, we're not going to get to see too much of the sun this morning by the looks of it, because it's quite a cloud bank to the sunrise direction, so I think we're going to struggle with that a little bit. But anyway, we're out for a beautiful walk. The challenge today with today's photography is going to be composition, and with the open moorland, quite often you find that it's difficult to find compositions because basically it's quite devoid of any detail or any interest. That's not to say that there's a beautiful location here, because it is. It's an absolutely stunning location. But the problem is often finding something of interest to lock that composition into, something for your eyes to focus on, something for you to look at. So we're going to struggle a little bit with that maybe. Well, on the way up to the tour, I just stopped to take a very, very quick picture of this tree in a reflection, because there's some nice colours being reflected in the water. But you know, however I tried, I just couldn't get the composition exactly how I wanted it. So sometimes interesting details and features aren't enough. They've also got to fit and all work together and play nicely in the frame. Let's go and see what we can find. I'm hopeful, heading on to the top of Birch Tor. Let's see you up there. You know, coming out on a shoot with expectations can really be quite a bad thing, because you never really know what you're going to get. I just got up to the top of Birch Tor, and I was thinking that today was going to be all about monochrome photography, because of the weather forecast for the last few days. It said that it's really going to be quite cloudy. But maybe, as you can see behind me, there's actually quite a bit of blue sky about. So I came up here then thinking I'd be shooting colour images, and lo and behold, I've set the camera up, and now we're back to probably black and white again, because it's gone really completely dull in the opposite direction. Let's just show you. So there is some colour in the sky over there, but a lot of the direct sunlight which is falling on my subject has been obscured by the sky. So, sorry, obscured by the cloud. So we're going to have a bit of a rethink. Anyway, I've been looking around, and I think I've worked out what I want my composition to be. So I guess it's time to have a look and talk through that with you. So this composition that I've set up here, from where I'm stood, it was really all about using the Tor as the foreground interest. And I know using foreground interest is one of those things which quite commonly gets used in composition. It's the way that we use it that's important. And one of the things I want to get over in this video is that composition rules are there, but I don't like to think of them as rules. You'll hear that said all the time. They are really more about guidelines and pointers and things which can help you with your photography in moving forward and deciding how you're going to capture an image. So walking up onto this tour, what I could see was that in front of me it was almost like a ridge line. There was rocks to the left, rocks to the right, and there was, you know, that was kind of a feature of it, and something that would be nice to capture in my image. But like with a lot of open moorland locations, it's very high viewpoint. There's a lot of barren, empty and open landscape behind it, and it's quite difficult to find the features. Now, we may try something with that later on, because we can put long lenses on and look at some of those distant things, but I'm sort of lacking this type of image in my portfolio on Dartmoor, so I really want to stay away from the detail and capture more of that open moorland. And the way that I've decided to do that is to use that ridge line, use it as a main feature of this image. So up on the screen now, you'll be able to see that from the bottom sort of right hand frame, driving out across at a slight diagonal out towards the horizon, we've got maybe 1, 2, 3 sets of boulders and rocks on the top of this tour, and that's the features which I want to use. I'm going to compose this in a vertical format, probably cropped to a 4:5, and the reason for that is because I want to have that sense of moving forwards and into the image rather than across the image. So we can use crop and we can use the format whether horizontal or vertical, as well as a compositional tool. I'm quite pleased with this image. I couldn't sort of, I struggled a little bit with the light, because when I came up here, I thought I would be taking black and white, and then I thought I'd be taking colour, because the cloud is shifting and changing all the time. But the image which I've taken now, hopefully is going to be good in colour as well. If not, then you'll see the black and white version. So let's get that up on the screen for you now. Have a good look at that, and I'm going to move on and find my next composition. I've met up with a path called the Two Moors Way. It's one of the ancient routes across the Dartmoor National Park, and I've been walking along here, wondering how I can sort of like capture it, because I think, you know, sort of in the world of AI, where it's threatening to sort of destroy our photography, capturing our experiences out in the landscape are really, really important. So I've been looking for a few different compositions. One of the things that's captured my imagination, and really I think it's a huge potential, is the ice patterns that I've been walking past. These ice patterns are all along the side of the path in various pools and different positions. But it's difficult to try and find a composition that will capture them. But I was looking from the top of Birch Tor, where we've just come down from, and I could see that there looked like there was a pond or something. It's actually frozen over. So I'm going to investigate that, because I'm sure that hopefully I can find some sort of composition there that we can do. So let's go and take a look at that pond. Well, I think I found something that's going to work. Quite like the way that the sky is reflecting in the surface of the ice. It looks really quite nice. Now there are patterns on the surface, so we're going to have to see how it works out. And there's some clumps of grasses and moss growing which break up that surface. And the challenge really is going to be composing those in some kind of harmonious way, so they don't look just like an absolute complete mess. So we'll work on that. We're going to be trying to work carefully with the edges of the frame and think about the cropping. But we can also see this great expanse of moorland into the distance, and some stormy clouds on the sky as well. So I'm thinking moody, black and white, stormy, looking into the distance, lots of foreground interest in there, and quite a gritty sort of black and white image. See how we get on with this. I'm going to set the camera up, and then I'll show you my composition. I've been looking around, and I've found a number of different compositions that I really like. I've tried some different viewpoints, low viewpoints, higher viewpoints, zooming in, backing off, really getting really quite close to the surface of the water as well. But the composition that I've settled on is this one that I'm going to talk to you about now. The reason I've settled on this one is because, going back to what I was talking about when I was walking along the track earlier, along the Two Moors Way, I wanted to capture this sense of space still as well, and the experience of actually walking along this track and this path, because it's not just about capturing images, it's about capturing experiences and my time out in the landscape as well. That's important to me. So I've actually managed to put together what I think is reasonable composition that manages to do that. So let's get some either a raw file or something up on the screen so you can have a look at it. So where it is now, I've actually cropped into the 4/3 crop. And the reason I've done that is because when I set the composition up, I was worried about a lot of empty space on the right hand side. So I just wanted to narrow that down a little bit. But the idea behind this composition is to use the tufts of grass and mosses that we've got to lead our eye around the frame. Now, it's obviously very difficult to try and make sure that we arrange these in a manner so they're not a real complete mess. And that's the issue that I had with some of my other compositions that I tried before. Although I liked them, I thought they looked a little bit too messy and there was absolutely no order to them at all. I think what I've managed to get with this is a much better sense of depth and an order in the image. So we've got the clumps of grasses in the foreground, bottom left-hand corner, and they kind of point up towards the right-hand side. So I think that diagonal flow works well. And then they meet up with the other grasses, which kind of go off diagonally from the right to the left. And then we've got that dark sort of hill on the horizon as well. Not sure that's going to work out. Beyond that, it looks a little bit boring, but we have got some really nice, interesting texture in the sky. So I'm going to look at capturing and using that texture to finish off the top of the frame and create this sense of depth, distance, and also capture the feeling of these grasses and ice in the foreground, which I think is going to look really, really nice. Got high hopes for this image. I should know better than saying that, because expectations are a bad thing to have. Well, I've finally got to the top of Hookney Tor. Seems to have taken ages to get here. It's not actually that far though, but that's one of the things to really bear in mind when you're out on a landscape photography hike. I generally plan to move at about 1 mile an hour, so even a 4 or 5 mile walk, you know, can easily take 5-6 hours time you stop for a bit of lunch. Anyway, we don't want to talk about food, although I desperately want some, and I'm going to have some in a minute. I've got to the top of here, and as you can see at the moment, the light has really gone quite flat. There's a lot of cloud moving about. It's some nice cloud, there's some nice texture in it, and it's coming out okay on this little camera, but it's not transforming well into decent sort of photographs and compositions. But I'm hoping that when I get down to Grimspound, possibly the light's going to lift a little bit, and we'll be able to get some different images. So let's get the camera set up and I'll talk about this next photograph that I'm going to take. So I hope you can hear me. I'm trying to protect the mic from the wind a little bit. So I'll set my composition up, and like I said, I wanted to talk about the rule of thirds, because when I started looking at this photograph, I realized that there was a number of elements in here that worked really, really well. Now, one of the things when you come to a location like this, which has got a lot of sort of significance, whether it's historical or cultural or whatever, you really want to capture those elements. And without any doubt, right here now, I'm looking down into Grimspound, which is probably the best preserved sort of Bronze Age or even Neolithic, certainly prehistoric remains on Dartmoor. And I wanted this sort of pound, this circle in my image, but I want it to be photographically interesting as well, not just a record of having been here. And one of the ways I'm doing that with this composition is I'm using something called the rule of thirds. Now, the rule of thirds is really something that's used all the time in photography, and sometimes we don't even realize we're using it. It is the most common of the rules. I don't really like calling them rules. They're more sort of like guidelines. And even with this one, you can sort of modify it to meet your own needs. So I've been trying various different things, zooming in, zooming out, moving the camera up and down. And originally I had this outcropping of rocks exactly on one of the thirds within the intersections. So what I've decided to do really for this composition is to keep it on a third, but lower the camera down slightly. So it's not exactly on one of the thirds, but it is working reasonably well with it. But what I also found is that if I lowered the camera just a little bit more, I could have the Tor on the horizontal third and the top of the hill in the background, on the top edge of that, on the top left, on the horizontal third on there as well. So I thought that gave a nice diagonal relationship. And although we've lost the light, we have got a little bit of interest in the sky. It's not a lot, but just maybe I can pull some of that back and turn this into a nice black and white image. In terms of focusing, I'm focusing, funnily enough, a third into the image. I'm shooting at about 40th of a second at f11, and we'll take a few images of that and see what they look like. And then I really do want to get down to Grimspound and borrow one of these prehistoric huts so that I can sit down and have a bit of shelter from the wind and have some lunch.
I cropped the final photograph into a letterbox format. I will explain why in the next edition of Exposed Thoughts, my newsletter. Use the link here or in the description to subscribe. Until then, get out and enjoy your photography.